Getting closer and closer to the draft, me and Matt Williamson are going to do some business. That's right. Bengals and Falcons doing business right here on the first segment of Locked On NFL.
The barbershop is open and Tony Wiggins has a chair for you. He's ready with some real NFL talk. The local experts of Locked On bring their expertise, and Wiggy is ready with his clippers and shears. Sit down and enjoy. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
No doubt about it. It is your team every day here on Locked On NFL. We thank you for making us your first listen, reminding you that wherever you find your podcast, you can find us. And we will be right there, man, making sure you do not miss it. Whether you watch or listen, make sure wherever you are, you tap in so you do not miss an episode. Like today's episode, which is brought to you by the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay tuned for the Armada Player of the Week later on in the show, a show that Matt Williamson, of course, our Friday co-host for the Peacock and Williamson podcast, one of the founders of Locked On NFL. We're going to talk about the Rams and the Commanders. It's going to be a case study, like how they move this close to being able to beat the Philadelphia Eagles. They're doing it a little bit differently, but more than one way to get it done. We're going to talk about which one of those teams can make a step closer to the Philadelphia Eagles. The forgotten team in the NFC, the Detroit Lions. What will the Lions do? Recent history says they're going to move around a little bit in the first round. We'll let Matt Derry tell you why and who they may be targeting. And then at the top of the draft, two teams that we're trying to figure out. Atlanta keeping Kirk Cousins. I have no idea what they're doing. And Trey Henderson not getting paid and he getting mad. I have no idea what they're doing. But Matt Williamson, I'm going to propose a trade. I'm going to propose that the Atlanta Falcons call Cincinnati and say, we'll give you a second-round pick this year and a fourth-round pick next year for Trey Henderson. What do you say, man? Atlanta gets their pass rusher and the Bengals get more draft picks to screw up this year.
All right, I did a little research, did a little digging, and I don't think anyone will be shocked that the Falcons' 31 sacks last year were only better than the Patriots. Second worst in the league in terms of sack production. But let me take this a step further. This is going to blow people away. Over the last 5 years, the Falcons have the fewest sacks in the league. Over the last 10 years, the Falcons have the fewest sacks in the league.
What?
Over the last 20 years, the Falcons have the fewest sacks in the league. That's nuts. I mean, this has been going on. My son is 18, and he has never seen a Falcons team that can rush the passer. I mean, like, that's insanity to me. They're always at the bottom every year.
I had a black beard the last time the Falcons were a good pass rushing team. So you know damn well that was a long time ago. But here we are once again, and the Falcons are sitting here trying to figure out what do we do in the draft, but they got a backup quarterback making $21 million a year. I'm going to listen to Aaron Freeman here, and then we're going to come back and we're going to hear
I got some more
else.
thoughts on it.
Yeah. I want you to give some. Here's Freeman talking about what do the Falcons do in the draft. It's going to take a little bit, so check it out.
Well, the reason why you would maybe not value Green and Ezra as highly as you value Michael Williams and Shamar Stewart is because we know that power translates. We saw this last year with the impact that Jared Verse had in year one, defensive rookie of the year. We also saw who was the second most effective edge rusher from last year's class in terms of immediate impact. That was not Laiatu Latu with the Indianapolis Colts. It wasn't Dallas Turner with the Minnesota Vikings. It was, in fact, Chop Robinson with the Miami Dolphins. It was quietly the second best edge in last year's class. Now, why were Verse and Robinson the two best? Well, we saw with Verse all day long, all year long, power translates. His power was fully on display, being that disruptive edge rusher, generating 77 pressures last year. And we saw some 50 some odd pressures, if I'm not mistaken, for Chop Robinson. Why? Because Chop Robinson can convert speed to power with that sort of fastball speed rush. And people thought, he's a
look, I had to cut Aaron off. The reason why I'm cutting Aaron off, man, because he was giving out good information. But Aaron was being rhetorical. He was telling us stuff that we already knew, that if Falcons can't rush the passer, they can't identify pass rushers, they can't do none of that stuff. So it just exacerbates the things that we're sitting here talking about of why aren't they calling the Bengals about Trey Hendrickson? Come on, man. It's got to be a no-brainer at this point.
So a couple layers here. I mean, it just came out that Flacco is signing with the Browns. Does that mean Cousins is not going to the Browns? I mean, I assume it's going to be Flacco, Pickett, and a draft pick of some sort. So what do you do with the Cousins money? Where does he land? Do you just flat out cut him? That's somewhat of an impediment just contractually. And the other impediment, though, is Wig, they got the 15th pick. They got the 42nd pick. They have a 4th rounder, no 3rd, and they have 2 7s. So they're really light on capital. That being said, if I can get Hendrickson for 46, then I would really look to trade down from 15 and recap some picks. Maybe someone wants to get ahead of the Steelers for Shador or whatever. Then it adds up to me. But they don't have much cap space. They don't have much picks. But boy, they have a need, and he would fill it in a big, big way.
They absolutely have a need. And the Bengals have a need. Their need should actually be to keep him, pay him, and then add more defensive players. You won't believe what they got going on in Cincinnati and who they're actually looking at. Check these guys out. Check Jake and my man Rapine out here, James, with Locked on Bengals.
The Cincinnati Bengals continue to spend time before the draft with running backs projected to go on day 2. Does that mean it's in play earlier than we thought in the draft? How strongly do we think they're considering running back with these visits, with the interest they're clearly showing in the position? And we've talked about on the show quite a bit this week, more than perhaps we anticipated on Monday. We've talked a lot about running back this week.
Yeah, and look, you could take it twofold. One, you're right. They don't count against their 30 visits that they have. But they're also not going to waste their time, which you hinted at. And so I think there's interest. And in what it's going to come down to is what they can address, when they address it, how confident they feel in some of these other guys that they've looked at late day 2, early day 3, whether it's guard, whether it's defensive tackle, whether it's edge. They've done a lot of homework in that meat, in that area of the draft, which it really is the meat of the draft. And are these guys that they're bringing in, which they are free visits, but time is time. And so you're not just doing it to do it. So I do think that there's some interest there.
Look, man, I ain't going to sit here and pretend the Bengals don't need a running back. And I ain't going to sit here and pretend that just because you have other things that are more pressing needs that you don't do your due diligence with running backs, right? And the value for the running backs in the second round with Henderson and Judkins, those guys are going to be highly productive players that are going to give you some of the same stuff a guy in the first round is going to take. I ain't mad at him for doing it, but it just seems like to me Cincinnati's always doing things that they ain't supposed to do at the wrong time.
Yeah, 100%. It's hard to trust the organization from the top down. I like Chase Brown, but they asked too much of him. I mean, they put a lot on his plate when he was healthy, so getting a compliment makes sense. I don't know what Zach Moss's situation is. He's still on the roster as far as I know. But the short of it is your interior O-line is Ted Karras at center, Cody Ford at right guard, and Cordell Volson at left guard. I mean, that's a real problem for me. Their defense, as we saw last year, is littered with needs. I mean, especially on the edge, and especially if they were to move on from Hendrickson, then they really have nothing there. They've drafted so poorly on defense. So I can't imagine embracing this philosophy of just give me more and more weapons and we're going to win games 42-41. I don't get it. Now, I do understand giving Higgins money. Fine. But where I think you slip up, and no one seems to be talking about this, is, but then don't give Gesicki money. I mean, I can find, I can find Gesicki in the 3rd round every year. You know what I mean? And you're giving him money. No. I mean, give that to a guard. Give that to a D lineman, you know?
Yeah, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
No.
It actually does make sense that they're looking at running back because of the type. Like, I like the big body types for them because I think, like you said, they're going to have
a big O-line.
Yeah, you got to get somebody, man, that's going to really have you by default controlling the football game. Quinshon Judkins, somebody can take a little bit more of a pounding. Yeah, so I do like the fact that they're doing it. It's just that it's coming at a time when the Bengals have done so much other stuff wrong. It just looks like a priority that's a little bit out of step with everything.
And real quick, Wig, I can condone, Burrow's and points on the board. If I can get a big running back behind that big offensive line, I can make my defense's life a little easier too. You definitely can eat some clock. I mean, I get that part, but
and I say it all the time: the draft doesn't end in round 1 and round 2. So it's just that for a team like the Bengals that don't hit on a lot of draft picks, asking them to hit on day 3 picks is a little bit of a stretch. All right, let's get to it a little bit more. We're going to talk about what would the Lions do. They do something a little bit more often than people realize, and that's move around in the first round. And this might be another year where they get that done. We'll discuss that and more here in just a second on Locked On NFL. All right, today's show is sponsored and brought to you by Nissan Armada. That is right, man. Nissan Armada 2025 version of Nissan Armada is the absolute truth. And I know you guys know that already because we've been talking about it here. And the Nissan Armada Player of the Week is brought to you by our friends over at Nissan and the all-two 2025 Nissan Armada. That would be Armand Membo. That's who we're going to choose today because of his versatility. There's no question about the fact that he is heavy duty, rugged, and he conquers everything on the football field with capability and confidence. Who does that sound like? That sounds like a Nissan Armada. They say go forth and conquer, and that's exactly what I think Armand Membo is going to do when he gets to the National Football League. It's clear that our player of the week is out here ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can in the all-new Nissan Armada or any of their outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, Pathfinder, and more, and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. All right, man, moving along here. I'm tagging along my man, Matt Williamson here from Peacock and Williamson podcast and so much more, hanging around the building all the time up there in Pittsburgh. We'll get to another team that has done a lot of things right lately, and that is the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions have been the team that most teams who have not won a lot, and 3 years ago, your team was like Jacksonville. That's what I'm talking about, was right there neck and neck with them. Well, they have been the thing that probably got a lot of people fired who were sitting there neck and neck with them 3 years ago when they were one of the worst teams in the league. Look at the Jaguars, look at the Jets, look at all of those teams that were picking at that time, the Raiders. All of these teams have changed coaches, and the Detroit Lions have only changed assistant coaches. That's because they've done a whole lot right. A lot of times, everybody just gives Dan Campbell all the credit, but Brad Holmes gets some of that credit too. And Matt Derry is going to tell you something that they do a lot in the draft that they might do this year as well.
How Brad Holmes likes to trade up to get Brian Branch, trade up to get Terrion Arnold, trade up to get Jamison Williams, move back actually to get Jahmyr Gibbs, but you know he likes to be active in the first round. The Lions sit at number 28 if the Lions decided to move up to get a player. And that would be if the Lions called up the Atlanta Falcons and said, we want to trade and get the number 15 pick in the first round. Now, guys at 15 include, Jihad Campbell and maybe Ratledge and maybe Booker or somebody like that. Actually, Ratledge won't be at 15, but maybe Tyler Booker would be. So what if the Lions wanted to move up to 15 to get the guy they really want? And this is pointed out by Russell Brown at lionswire.com. The Lions would have to trade, of course, their first round pick and swap the picks. So they would trade number 28 to move up 13 spots. They would also have to trade their fourth round pick, number 102 overall, and likely a second round pick next year.
Exactly the kind of trade we were talking about. And he mentioned the team that we actually were talking about a little bit earlier. We actually did that by accident. That's a good programming thing. Now I didn't mean to do that, but seriously, this is the type of draft when you think about Detroit and what they need. They could probably sit there and get it, but if they target a person, they've always talked about adding a permanent edge rusher, not a Zadarius Smith type, on the other side of Aiden Hutchinson. This is a good draft for that. And then when you talk about interior linemen, they could wait for Grace Abel maybe, or you coming up, you are talking about Tyler Booker and maybe even Armand Membo, who I just mentioned a second ago, if they get high enough. Good draft to be Detroit, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean they're a good football team with a good roster, and they're well organized from the top down. GM and coach, as you mentioned. And I haven't given them a lot of thought. They kind of been out of mind a little bit because every mock you see, usually they just take Pierce or Ezerique or, some edge rusher to finish out games in the dome, which makes all the sense in the world. And they do have Marcus Davenport now to pair opposite Hutchinson, but a speedball off the edge would make a lot of sense to me. They alluded to guard. It looks like Mahogany and Skipper are going to fight for the Zeitler job, which I think they're high on both, but neither is a superstar. I wonder Decker's getting up in age. Could they move up to get a left tackle? Like the Ohio State kid, you could maybe get it at a discount and not need him for another year, or play him at guard. That would make some sense to me. I mean, maybe this is the year you prepare for next year, but they're always a splashy team. They're always aggressive, and I doubt they'll just sit back on their hands and take what's there, you know?
Yeah, and I was going to ask you too, because I mentioned Mimbo as our Nissan Armada player of the week. There's some people that may want to overdraft him a little bit in the top 10, but I do think if he's hanging around here 12, 13, if you're Detroit and somebody wants to do that, here's the thing that they have. Most people consider him either a right guard or a right tackle. Detroit's best lineman, which may be the best lineman in the league who plays right tackle, can easily play left tackle. It's a weird thing. I mean, it's like he's like Larry Allen. It's like and Larry Allen is one of my guys now. But I'm telling you, that kid in Detroit, man, you can play him just about anywhere in order to make things fit, and you won't lose a thing. So even that is a little bit in play when you're talking about a guy like Mimbo, maybe even for Detroit.
Mimbo is such an interesting name because that's somebody, if I was Detroit, I would put pretty high on the list, you know, and maybe play him year one at guard at that spot where Zeitler's at, which maybe he'd just stay there and be awesome. Or, you know, when Decker does move on, you can move Sewell, you could figure it out from there. But I bet they want to keep their O-line a strength. You know, I mean, it's really the backbone of the organization. It's a very Dan Campbell thing to do. You can't let that slip just a little. You might as well stay on top of that in a big way.
Yeah, and if nothing says toughness more than about Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell, if I'm not mistaken, was a tight end, correct?
Yeah, big blocking tight end. Yeah,
big blocking tight end, right? So they have T.J. Hawkinson on the roster when he gets there, and Hawkins is a pretty damn good player, right?
Yeah.
But they decided we weren't going to pay him. They traded him in the division, and they went and got another kid, the kid out of Iowa. So it's just like sometimes a guy can be good. As a matter of fact, it was Iowa replacing Iowa.
Yeah. All these Iowa tight ends.
Right. So it's like sometimes being pretty good is okay, but if you don't match like our mentality, right? If the way you play doesn't necessarily line up with what we envision us being, we'll move on from you, even if it means trading you in the division and replace you with a dude that does do what we want him to do. Like, for instance, I can't imagine Hawkinson. Sometimes the kid in Detroit goes 3 quarters without getting the target. Hawkinson wasn't doing it. He's ineffective if he's out there and you're not throwing him the ball. Mm-hmm. So that's how lining things up with Detroit and them knowing exactly who they're supposed to be going after and getting and matching them with the way that you play. Amon-Ra St. Brown goes 2 quarters sometimes without touching the ball, and you never hear him complain. The best running back doesn't start. They know how to do this, and I think it's going to be an effective way that they move in the draft too.
The one name they mentioned was Booker from Bama. Well, he certainly fits their mentality. I mean,
sure does.
He's not the quickest of foot or whatever, but he would be a plug-and-play guard and just keep it going. Maybe you could even hang where you're at and get him. Who knows?
Yep, you might be able to do that if you're Detroit. All right, so there's a couple of teams chasing teams like Detroit and Philadelphia in the NFC. One's Washington and one's the Rams. Rams have been there before. It's 2 different ways of looking at things. We're going to look at both of those teams offseason and see who's getting closer in the race to catch those 2 teams. We'll do it in just a second here on Locked On NFL. All right, 2 teams for different reasons people are going to be looking at in the NFC this year. Washington, because they got so close in their battle against Philadelphia, played Philly tough twice in the regular season, lost a not so close game in the NFC Championship game, but it's closer than the score probably indicates a little bit. And some people question what they've done in the offseason. Here's my man David Harrison to explain to you why Debo Samuel should not be overlooked as a good addition to the Washington Commanders.
There is a player that some people have some concerns about. A player that some people say even drafting or even trading a 5th-round draft pick to bring in is overpaying. And that is wide receiver Debo Samuel, who I think could be a stud on this 2025 Washington Commanders roster. First and foremost, just turned 29 in January, so he's still on the right side of 30, still young enough, does have a little bit of an injury history, also had battle with pneumonia last year, ended up in the hospital, and was unable to work out for a while and things like that, which certainly impacts a lot of the things that he went through during the course of the season. But he played 15 games for the San Francisco 49ers in 2024, came away with 51 receptions, 670 yards, 3 receiving touchdowns, added 42 carries, 136 rushing yards, 1 rushing touchdown, a down season for sure, right? A lot of those numbers are either like second or third fewest for him. Total production was not that great for him. Obviously less than 1,000 yards of total offense, and he's supposed to be one of the premier players on that San Francisco 49ers roster. Now, and I would say, not to excuse it necessarily, things like that, right? But Christian McCaffrey's situation, not having a guy like Christian McCaffrey in the backfield is big. Losing Brandon Ayuk to a torn ACL during the season is big. Not having your first-round receiver, Ricky Pearsall, available because he ends up getting shot, before the season even begins and has to come back and recover from that is big. There's just a lot of things that the San Francisco 49ers were a little bit snake bitten in 2024, and Debo Samuel certainly was not spared.
Listen, man, Debo's is an interesting player, and I call this case study. That's what I call it, because Washington can be that team that's so close, man. They're just reaching for it. Now, contractually, they didn't give up a whole bunch, and they're not paying them a whole bunch. If this doesn't work, they can just move on after one season. So I think it's worth it.
I do too. Big picture with Washington, though, I have mixed feelings. I mean, I think there's something to be said for we have what looks like a superstar quarterback on a rookie deal for the next three years. That's awesome. Let's be aggressive. But I also think, and I think Houston fell victim to this just 1 year ago after Stroud's rookie year, where you think you can run before you can walk. I mean, champions weren't built overnight. We were talking about Washington being like a 4-win team this time last year. And all of a sudden, Tunsil, Samuel, Ekeler, Ertz, Wagner, you're pretty old. And you've mortgaged future picks in the Tunsil deal. You've mortgaged picks in this year's draft. I love the aggression. I love that they've rid the facility of the stink of Daniel Snyder, which was job number one, and they have a quarterback and a coach. But I just wonder if they're pushing their chips in a little early.
Yeah, man, it's scary.
Yeah.
Because they did it twice. They did it with both Tunsil and they did it with Debo Samuel. Like people whose names alone are just like better than the actual tape. And that's the thing about football people. People that do this for a living each and every day, man, they tell you to not. And I've had guys tell me this: we don't get caught up in that right nowism. Sometimes they see stuff slipping on tape, and when these teams let these guys go, they let them go for a reason. You just don't let people that have quote unquote Hall of Fame names walk out of the building.
You're with them every day in practice, and
you're with them every day.
Tells you he's slipping, and your health staff says, his knee's not as good as it used to be, and he doesn't practice on Wednesdays, and right.
You're hiding something, man. So the teams that can afford to take chances like this, one of them's like the Rams, right? So the Rams took chances a few years back with of course Jalen Ramsey and Von Miller, and they won the Super Bowl, right? So it looks like everything they've done since then has been worth it. Then they got Matthew Stafford late. They got Stafford again. Well, you wouldn't believe what they're spending a lot of time on in pre-draft right now. This is a case study. Teams that are close, one team that hasn't been there in a while, the other team that wants to try to hang on to it and get back, both added veteran receivers. The other guy, though, doesn't have health problems in Devontae Adams. But listen to what the Rams are doing in the draft in a year where they're pretty damn close to the Eagles, but they're doing something else. Check this out.
The Rams have reportedly spent considerable time with his projected first-round QB prospect. Who is it? There was a report that came out today from ESPN NFL insider Adam Schefter that says that the Rams have spent considerable time during the interview process with the Giants, Saints, and Rams. Adam Schefter, he tweeted sources. Ole Miss QB Jackson Dart visited today with the Cleveland Browns and will next fly to Las Vegas to visit with the Raiders, sources tell me, and Fielding Yates. Dart also has spent considerable time during this interview process with the Giants, Saints, and Rams. So we have known this for a little while now, that the Rams have had some interest in Jackson Dart. And I can tell you from my sources that they do as well. Sean McVay and this organization, they do like him as a prospect. And Les Snead has already said at the NFL GM meetings that they would not be afraid to draft a quarterback, and you always want to consider drafting a quarterback, because the truth of the matter is in the National Football League, if you want to get an elite quarterback, you have to most likely find them in the draft.
The Rams said we are who we are, but you know what? I know what we'll never be again, and that's broke. There's a rapper called NBA Youngboy. Keeps going in and out of jail, man. And I asked him, why did he name himself NBA? Was he a basketball player, but he chose to be a rapper? They said, no, NBA stands for Never Broke Again, right? So if we were a rap group, we'd be Never Broke Again, Wiggy and Willie. That's what we'd be. And the Rams are drafting like they don't ever want to be broke again at the quarterback position, and it's just a different way of looking at things.
And I get it. Yeah, I mean, especially if McVay looks at Dart, who I absolutely think needs a year coming from that system in Mississippi, that a year from now, 2 years from now, and I'm not saying it'll be Matthew Stafford, of course, but you'd still be pretty strong at that position and keep you competitive, and whether Adams is there or not. And Adams is such a win-now move that you could maybe afford to invest a little in the future after going strong for him, because you're going to be competitive this year, even without a draft pick added to the team. They look at the Rams are really interesting, though. They're progressive thinkers, and they look at the league a little differently than the other 31 teams. I mean, last year's the first time they used a first-round pick since Jared Goff. I mean,
and hit a home run when they did it, too.
Yeah, right. They don't send their scouts to the combine. Like they do a lot of things a little differently. And frankly, I respect it. I think McVay's the best coach in the league if it's not Andy Reid. And I think they'll always get it right. But part of me goes, do I want Dart, or do I just want the best corner on the board? Whether it's the Kentucky kid or Barron or whoever, and really try to win now. It's not like corners grow on trees either.
No, it's not like corners grow on trees. They've done a real good job in their front seven.
Yeah.
And getting people don't understand something. You get somebody. You went from getting Cooper Kupp, his production, from a second, third round pick type to a day 2 guy. And then when he got hurt, you go and get Puka Nacua. And it's just like, are you serious? I told Chris Carter this yesterday. I said, when it comes to teams that never have missed anything, like the Pittsburgh Steelers have always had a great coach in my whole life. They've had 3. Right. I said, Green Bay seems like they never missed a quarterback my whole life. They had Bart Starr when I was born. Right. And then I doubled back and I said, you know what? Pittsburgh has always seemed to have, too, a center. In my whole life, it's insane that they've had that many. And now with the Rams, man, the Rams are like, they are going to hit on a wide receiver not drafted in the first round. They've gone from that to this. Who knows? They might draft somebody this year in the third. Maybe they get Jalen Royals and he turns out to be a superstar. But when you draft that way, man, it kind of makes you arrogant for a purpose. That means you feel like everything you do, you're going to hit on it. So guess what? We'll move how we want to move. And it's just 2 different ways of looking at things between them and Washington, where, like you said, they might be pushing their chips in a little bit too quickly.
I can't help myself, Wig, but I'm sure Chris dealt with this too. But there was those 3 or 4 years between Marquise Pouncey and now Frazier where I heard every day from a Steelers fan, nothing matters till they get a center. They got to get a Hall of Fame center. Like they're just Webby to Dermani to, it's my whole lifetime. It's like the coaches. It's crazy.
Yeah, man, it's unreal. And the Jaguars are out here struggling without a center, and Pittsburgh just seems like it's almost like I follow these dog breeders, right? Greatest Rottweiler breeder in Germany, Oliver Neubrand. Okay. It's like for 50 years, his dogs have been champions. it's like, come on, man, y'all gonna let somebody else win? But that's how it goes when you do things the right way. Draft night answers a lot of questions, man. And we got a lot of questions that we're going to get answered. But you want some answers prematurely, make sure you check out Locked On NFL Draft with Damian Parsons and Coach Keith Sanchez. 2 guys that really get into they grind the tape. They do it the way it's supposed to be done, and they come up with real valuable opinions. Make sure you check that out. Check us out, too, here on Locked On NFL twice a day. That's what we do, man. We bring it to you like you can't get it anywhere else. Matt Williams is about to go attack Pittsburgh with all the vigor of a champion, and we'll see you back here Monday with Julian Council here on Locked On NFL. Thanks for joining us.